Hello and welcome back. How did you survive during July? It's been really hot, hasn't it? And we haven't seen rain for weeks. How did your plants flourish? You've seen what ours have been looking like through the month and the measures that we've taken to try and ensure they get through to their harvest. But do let us know in the comments down below exactly how you got on and how you're faring after all this really Mediterranean weather that we've all been experiencing. Now, August is high summer, and it's also a month which is a lot like spring. The shortening days that we see through August, well, they trigger the germination of those plants that like autumn's damper conditions. Now, during August there is still sowings that can be made even at this seemingly late stage in the season. There's certainly much to harvest, and of course still no rain is in the forecast here, not for the next 2 weeks or more, and that's about as far ahead as I can see, so there will certainly be plenty of watering to do. So let's get into the jobs for August. Now, in drier summers there may be less weeds, but do keep an eye on those weeds that are appearing in your garden, because if they get time to set their seed and disperse them everywhere, it'll be much work for you to do in the years to come. And as I've said on many occasions, don't forget to check under large leaves such as brassicas, courgettes, squash, because they'll quite happily hide under there and disperse their seed from there without you even knowing, so do have a good check under there. Now, during the month of August, as I alluded to earlier, there is still things to sow, even though it seems quite late in the season to be sowing things. Oriental leaves are a very good thing to sow during the early part of August. Things like Chinese cabbage and pak choy. Also coriander and chervil. And they're all good to sow in the early part of this month. Also, during the first couple of weeks of August, it's a good idea to be sowing your spinach and chard so that it can overwinter. It'll give you small harvest during the early part of autumn. It will settle down and won't produce much over winter, but then as soon as we start to move towards the warmer weather of late February and into March, it will suddenly come into its own and start to give you harvest until eventually it wants to rise to flower and set its seed. Now, during the second half of August, it's a good time to be sowing your cabbages and your onions and your spring onions to overwinter and then become ready for you during the following year. Also, you can be sowing your lettuce to have later on this year and into next year, and you'll cloche those later on when you plant them out so that they're protected from the worst elements of the weather, and they'll give you a harvest, maybe not a bountiful harvest, but they'll give you a harvest every now and again of some nice fresh lettuce leaves. And of course, if you have a greenhouse or a polytunnel like ourselves, you can actually plant them in there, and then you will get a little bit more of a harvest than you would if they were planted outside. But if you don't have those, yeah, you can still plant the lettuces outside, get them under a cloche, and you will still get some fresh leaves to enjoy during the latter part of the year. We are in bed 3, and the cabbages have all gone now. We took the last of the cabbages today, and now all of this land has become free. Where I'm standing right at this moment is where the Charlotte potatoes were. And oh, look at this, Trish, a bone. Now, I bet that was something our Lily buried. Now, of course, you guys, you weren't privileged enough to know Lily. Lily was our previous dog before we got Poppy, and Lily loved to bury bones, even if they had meat on them, just so that nobody else could get them, and they were just for her, and she'd never find them again. And every now and again they pop up, they come up through the soil. So here's to you, Dillis. Anyway, I digress. And yeah, so here we are in bed 3, and as I said, we had cabbages in here and calibres, and here we had our Charlotte potatoes, which you saw us harvest during the month of July. So there are still things that need to be planted out during August. So the things that I just mentioned that we sowed, the things like your oriental leaves and your chervil, lettuce and things like that, they still need space to go in. So you'll be planting those out this month. Also, Mrs. W and myself, we've been quite busy towards the latter part of July. We've been sowing our seeds. So we've got things like turnip, overwintering cauliflower and cabbages, things like that. And they can go in the spaces as they become available around the plot. So there are still things to plant out. Now, as you know, we like to plant our flowers in and around the vegetable garden. Mrs. W has plenty in the other gardens as well. But why should you want to spend your hard-earned money by buying seed when you can just get the seed? And you can already see here where I've brushed past this on a number of occasions. The seeds have already fallen, look. Now, I also worried about those being here. There's a weed. Look, we talked about weeds earlier. Shoo. Away you go. Now, I aren't so worried about these germinating if they do, because I'll just hoe them off in the spring as they come through in preparation to plant my vegetables. But you can see that these are all now, they're finished their flowering. And if we just take those off, you do want to let it dry. But if we open it up, so you can see just from that one head, all those seeds that you will get. And you can keep those in an envelope in a dry place indoors and start to sow those next March for them to be able to produce their flowers. These are tagetes, and you can see there are lots here, so we'll get lots of seed. That's the flower that they look like there beside the parsnips. And they just brighten the day up, make you smile. Even when all this hot weather is here and your vegetables are going yellow and you're wondering if there's going to be a harvest, but the flowers will always make you smile. Now, here underneath our plum tree, we're looking at some new dahlias that we actually planted out this year. These are new, and I think we've got an egg on the way, Mrs. W. I can hear the chickens. Good girls, keep you a-going. And these were a mix of colours, these dahlias. Some have been reds. Beautiful flowers. We love dahlias here, so especially out in the front garden we have a lot of dahlias. But at this time of the year, after they've been flowering for a little while, you do just need to take off the flowers and the seed head, and then they will continue to flower. Love the smell of lavender, and we do have quite a few lavender plants dotted about the garden, especially down there where we, in the family garden where all the grandchildren play, because it smells so gorgeous. Well, when these flowers are finished and they're finished flowering, you need to be cutting these down, so down to here, but do avoid going into this, which is the old wood. If you cut this as far back as here, you won't get anything for next year. Indeed, you won't get anything ever again. So as you cut the flowers back, only take them back where the greenery is, not into the old brown wood. And if you do that, that will ensure, oh, and that smells so gorgeous, it really does. It will ensure that that will flower once again next year. If you've got tomatoes that are planted outside, and we do have one or two that we planted outside, the majority are in the greenhouse, but we always like to plant one or two outside, and we have had some good harvests off these. You can see they're starting to turn red. There's some lovely trusses that are forming. But as we now get into the month of August, any further flowers, you're highly unlikely to be able to get them to fruit and to mature and go red before the colder weather of autumn arrives here and the frosts of late October and November. So it's time to say goodbye to these plants for now. They're not going to be growing anymore, and we pinch the growing tip out. And now what it will do, it will now concentrate on these fruit and getting them to mature. In the greenhouse or polytunnel, whatever you have and wherever you're growing them, We have already talked about the outdoor tomatoes, but also there's a little bit of work to do indoors with the tomatoes in here. And that is at this time of the year that you want to be taking the leaves off these stems right up to the first fruiting truss. And then as you've exhausted these and these next ones are starting to turn red, you can then start to take these off. And what that will do, it will allow good air circulation and also let more light through in order to ripen the ones that are still to ripen. And then the only other thing that we need to do, we talked about pinching the tops out there right now at the beginning of August, but sometime mid-August we should be pinching the tops out of these so that these plants then start to concentrate on ripening all the fruit that they have. We are at the fruit cage. I use the term fruit cage loosely because we don't actually really put anything around it. Having a couple of cats about, birds aren't so much of a problem to us with taking our soft fruits. The only problem we do get with birds, as you know, are pigeons, and they tend to like the brassicas or the peas. They don't tend to go after the fruit. And we are at a time of year when things are in, they're very abundant. There's lots of them. However, birds do like to go after soft fruits, so it's a good idea from this time of the year onwards to net your blackberries or raspberries if you have trouble with birds going after your fruit, just to protect them. This particular blackberry, it's a thornless variety, which is really great for when you want to come to pick it, because you can see it gets lots and lots on here. And I know that Michael down there in Galston on Michael's plot, if you haven't visited his channel, do go and have a look there. He had one that he was going to plant out, and I said to him, you know, you really want to get it on some kind of framework if you can, because they do get large and they will throw up these new stalks ready for next year. And you'll know if you're a follower of our channel, earlier in the month we actually pushed a load of these to the side and tied them back so that we can differentiate the difference between the new growth and that which is going to fruit this year. And they also get really big, which is why we get so much fruit on them. Actually, there's one ready up here now, Mrs. W. Who out, Mum? Gorgeous. See here, we're at our cooking apple tree, and during last month when it had its natural drop, it hadn't quite dropped enough apples, so we thinned these down so that there are basically no more than 2 apples per spur. That sort of ensures that you get good quality fruit and good sized fruit and not just all small fruit. However, as we come into August now, it's a good time to give these a summer prune. Now, by summer pruning, the reason why I want to be doing this, and the reason why people do it, is that if you want to keep this tree fairly small, I don't want it really to get any bigger than myself. Yeah. So it's easy to pick and it remains manageable for myself and Mrs. W. In fact, I might have to chop it down to here because Mrs. W is much shorter than I am. That's made her laugh. Now, when you prune in summer with your fruit trees, it actually restricts the growth. So if we take that off here, down to here, yeah, these leaves will be able to continue to grow and they can make branches which will then in turn in a few years time spur, but this won't then shoot off in that direction. Yeah. This tree is coming up to its 5th year in the ground, so this is why I want to now start summer pruning. Up until now it's only ever had a winter prune, and when you winter prune it encourages the tree to grow. So this is a piece of growth. I would have pruned this last November, December time, and you can see how much growth that is put on this year. It's just shot up a stem just like that. But the opposite happens when you do summer pruning. It doesn't do that, so it actually stops growing there then and won't shoot off in this direction. So you can start to control your tree We can just start to get it into shape, because it's not in a great shape. But that's because, you know, as I say, it's only now come to the stage in its life where we now want to get it into a nice shape. It's starting to produce fruit, nice fruit now, which it hadn't done for the last 5 years. We've had the odd one or two, haven't we? But they haven't been great fruit, and that's because the tree was still a juvenile. Year 5 and 6, that's normally when they start to produce nice fruit. I don't need it to be 24 feet tall, as I say, about as tall as me, lovely, and I can come along and we can just pick those apples off as and when we want them. Now, we shall be doing a video on this because this is the job that I've got to do over the next few days. So if you're not too sure, and obviously we haven't gone into a great detail about it, I've just listed it as a job for the month. You have fruit trees and you want to do the same thing, then don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below if you haven't done already, and then you'll be notified as and when we upload a video, and then you'll start to understand why we're doing this, and more importantly, how we do it. I saw some pictures of Ken's garden the other day. He very kindly posted something on his Instagram site, and his arch looks absolutely amazing. It's full of growth, full of beans. I think he actually said to me he's going to be starting his harvest this weekend of those beans, and I bet he's got absolutely hundreds of them. So good on you, Ken. Now, you'll remember that I said a couple of videos back about chopping the tops off of the runner beans once they reach the top of their frames, in our case the arch. And I know one or two people said that they haven't actually ever heard of that before, and they've never done that before, or why would you do that? Well, a bit like a lot of plants, you know, these have, especially like the tomatoes, where you pinch the tops out. Once it gets this time of the year, it's really difficult for them to actually produce any more fruit that's going to ripen by the time we get the colder weather and the frost, which will ultimately kill them. Runner beans, they, at the first sign of frost, will wilt and die. They'll be gone. So if we get a frost the first week of October, they'll be gone. Luckily for us, our average frost date is early November, so we tend to get beans right the way till the end of October. But by just taking the tops out once they've got as tall as you want them to get, they start to do this. And I did say to you that they would start to bush out, and you can see, which is why I sent Mrs. W up there, because from up there you can see it a lot more. He didn't have any of these a couple of weeks back, and now it's throwing all these out, and there's lots more flowers that are now coming, which in turn will mean lots more beans. And I shall do the same with these French beans once they get to here. They are rather taking their times, but they're only French beans. These are runners, so they're a bit quicker. So as we said earlier, right at the very beginning, there is still lots to do in August. It may seem very late in the season, but there is still much to do. Myself and Mrs. W have much to do, because one of the first jobs we need to do actually is to start to prune our apple trees, and we shall film that, as I said earlier, so keep an eye out for that if you're not too sure what to do, and you'll be able to see exactly how we do it. That'll probably happen tomorrow or Monday, but as it is the 30th of July today, as we're filming this, you've probably seen, as we've been walking around, that the polytunnel, where we put some plastic on it earlier in the year after it got battered to bits. That was actually really old. That piece of plastic has been hanging about in the shed for years, and hence was extremely brittle. And ever so slowly, since it's been on there, it's got the odd rip, and then more rips. And at the time we didn't really have the funds to be able to buy anything new, so we just tried to put that over so that we had some kind of polytunnel. But now I've just had the delivery of the new plastic. This isn't brittle, this is all quite nice. So one of the first jobs is for Mrs. W to tell me what to do, because she's the DIY expert. I tend to be in charge of the garden, but she's the DIY expert. Any structures that go up in and around here, she's absolutely 100% responsible for. So I better go, because we need to get on with this. You better tell me what you need me to do. We shall see you next time.